Hey everyone, and welcome to the 53rd installment of Digital Foundry Direct Weekly. It is indeed our weekly show where we talk about the latest gaming and technology news. And a packed show today, talking about Grand Theft Auto 5, Elden Ring's new patch, FSR 2.0, a big bunch of great stuff. And joining me to discuss it, first of all, Alex Battaglia.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on this list of news items this week that I'm really excited about. Some things I've been wishing for a long time on the AMD front, so let's get to it.
And of course, John Linneman.
I'm just happy to be here with you guys. This is the best time of the week. We get to hang out and talk about random video game stuff and technology.
But are you excited about the AMD stuff? That is the question.
Well, yes, because FSR 1.0 was really bad. I just had to say it. And FSR 2.0 looks really good.
Really good.
So, that's criticism. It's important. It leads to better things for everyone.
Who would have thought, John?
Okay, well, let's move on to our first topic, which is not related to AMD. Well, it is kind of tangentially. Okay, so Grand Theft Auto 5, when we're filming this direct, has actually dropped this week.
Yeah, GTA Fünf.
The best of them all. Not really.
Where did that come from, John? This sudden blast of Teutonic?
I saw
excitement.
Well, I put two and two together and like, okay, Alex is making a video. Alex is on my screen up there. German. It just like it struck me. I felt like I needed to do that.
Well, we're going to be talking about GTA5, but I'm suddenly thinking that GTA 6 should be set in Berlin.
I would love that. It's pretty rare to see games set in Berlin. That's why I always love the Hitman level in the club there. I'm covering GTA 5. I'm doing the John Linneman style premiere video, just talking about the upgrades that the game has over the previous gen console version on PlayStation 4. I'm using PlayStation 5 primarily in its like high performance ray tracing mode there, and I'm also comparing it against the PC version maxed out on like a super rig. And I'm talking about basically what upgrades you're getting there. And after having played through it, and the video will be out definitely by the time that I think the patrons watch this, as well as people in the audience. I think the general gist of it is if you'd played on last gen console, like Xbox One, PS4, and even Xbox One X and PlayStation 4 Pro, which didn't ever see any upgrades to this game, you're getting a really great experience over what you've seen before. It's 60 FPS. The visual upgrades are definitely substantial. I think the game also, in general, just it plays much better now due to that 60 FPS. And we can talk a bit about the gameplay at some point. So that's a really good upgrade for you in the audience. There are some things that are not upgraded, though, that I really wish would have been. And if you look over at the comparison to the PC there, I think it is actually a better thing than what you can get on PC at the moment, even on like PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. It's just that they didn't upgrade.
Which is better?
I think the PlayStation 5 version actually is better than the PC version.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Because this is in stark contrast to the screenshots you've been sending over the Slack this week.
I know. Like, the screenshots make it there's some aspects that I think they really should have upgraded, but the average experience is much better than what you get on PC. For example, I don't find the image quality on PC, in spite of being higher res, very good. That often. There's a lot of aspects of flicker and shimmer and all these things that the PS5 version doesn't even have. Then you have aspects of playability. Like, I think the menu and the loading and all of these things on PC just feel really clunky. And on like PlayStation 5, it's surprisingly okay. It's not lightning fast as we've seen in something like Ratchet and Clank or Marvel's Avengers or something like that, where it's like, but it's a lot better. And I think it just kind of going back to GTA 5, which I didn't play at the time of release because I just don't really like these games. I think if you're coming back to it, you're going to have a good time. I'm just a little bit curious about what people think of actually the gameplay nowadays, because going and playing this game, my goodness, it does so many things to make you not enjoy it really quickly.
Well, absolutely, because I should say before we started this direct, you said that it was not a good gameplay experience in any way, which made me laugh. I mean, in any way. I mean, this is like the biggest selling game of all time, I believe, at this point, possibly.
Yeah, if I were to just guess at what I was trying to say with that statement, not good in any way. It's the moment-to-moment gameplay, like moving your character around the screen, aiming your weapons, driving the cars. Like, I know people praise the game's driving, but it just felt really standard to me. Nothing particularly interesting there. And it's just so weighty and so slow. And like sometimes you'll like push your character forward and they'll turn all the way around just to turn. Like normally in a game, your character kind of turns on a dime rather quickly. Here, there's an entire animation set of them like going, like looping.
Yeah, it's like animation priority is the order of the day here.
Oh, and my goodness, that makes it so frustrating to play, I think, and also to make a DF video where you have to line up shots and the character's like juggling and dancing around. And I ended up doing a lot of my comparison shots in first person because that has the least amount of weirdness going on.
I think the first person mode in this game is actually really good. There's a lot of cool first person camera effects that were added because this was not something in the original release, by the way. That was added for Xbox One and PS4 and PC. So, and I always thought that was a cool feature.
Yeah, it's definitely surprisingly well done. Like they just attach a camera to the third-person character model, and you can tell that by the way it animates. And that's usually how I prefer first-person games to be. But at the same time, you're still limited to the way the third-person character moves. So sometimes he does things that you really don't expect with the way shoulder turns work. Usually in a game, when you turn in first person, it goes like this, just pans aside. But in this game, he moves his head, and then you can see his shoulder, and then he turns. And it really disorientates, I think, in a lot of ways.
Sickness.
So motion sickness, if you have motion sickness, GTA 5 is pretty brutal. But I think, just to round things off, I think this is a really good package that they brought out there. I think it's really cool that they've managed 60 FPS with ray tracing at a surprisingly high resolution on console. And I think the ray trace shadows, for being an open world game, are better in a lot of ways than things that we saw in like Far Cry. They look pretty good here. So a good package. I just wish that it came out on PC in a timely manner as well too, so I could do this comparison in a more interesting way.
I mean, the ray tracing is just sun shadows, right?
Yeah, it's just sun shadows, but they have a surprising effect on the game because if you played on PlayStation 4, the shadows were not very good. And if you played on PC, you could sure pump them up, but they still suffer from all these shadow mapping artifacts all over the place.
The game's mostly outdoors, really, right?
It is. Like, there's so few aspects of the game that are indoors, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah, so in terms of content, it should all be out by the time this video goes public. So yeah, we're planning to do, obviously we've got Alex's content, and then we've got Tom on platform comparisons, PlayStation 5, Series X. And then following that, after this video, will be X versus S. So in terms of production schedules, we didn't really get early access to this game. Well, we did by like, 24 hours, less than that if you live in New Zealand. So we had some issues there in terms of access to the game. We got the game at the last second, basically. So yeah, it's going to sort of roll out. It should, as I said, most of the content should be out now, fingers crossed, and Series S stuff to follow. But yeah, I'm kind of happy to see this. I think they needed to do this just to continue the GTA Online juggernauts, to keep it modern for the new consoles. It's probably the main reason why this happened. But, it's good to see that the story mode also got the upgrade as well. That wasn't left behind. But really, the focus is on GTA 6, the Berlin discotheque. Actually, Alex, you bring up Hitman 3, and their focus in Berlin was indeed on a Berlin discotheque.
Yeah, it was. It didn't make any sense. Like, it's on the outskirts of Berlin in some sort of forest area. That Berlin forests don't look like that, by the way. But like, it's also like I've never heard of like anything other than illegal raves being outside the city. So I have no idea what that was supposed to be, but it looked really cool. That episode, that level's really beautiful.
Fair enough. Okay, well, let's move on to the next news topic. So, Elden Ring, we've made lots of videos about it. Doubtless we'll be making many more, we are going to be reining them back because actually I think you made a pretty good point on Twitter, which is to say, Alex, that if we keep doing Elden Ring patch videos, then actually new games are not going to get covered.
Yeah, which is, I feel bad for the other people.
And fundamentally, we kind of seem to be chasing this sort of botched launch on PC. And yeah, they've really got to get their act together. And maybe they have, because Elden Ring patch 1.03 has appeared. Can't speak to the PC experience at the moment. And it's tricky, isn't it, Alex? Because with patch 1.02.3, we had effectively identical PCs producing radically different experiences.
Yes. I don't know what that's about, Rich. I don't know.
Which is, it's just kind of wacky. And we're seeing some indications that performance has improved on PC. Some stuff from CapFrameX suggesting that frame times are better. But fundamentally, what I wanted to look at with this patch was console performance, because that has been kind of controversial, to say the least. And more than that, we don't have to rely on the idiosyncrasies of individual pieces of PC hardware to actually figure out what's going on there. And I do have some interesting news here, which is that for Xbox owners specifically, Series owners, the game has improved. Now, I'm not going to say it's a night and day improvement, because it isn't. But it is interesting nonetheless to take a look at this comparison data. So Tom fashioned me with some 1.02 clips. I updated those with 1.03 comparisons. And it seems to me that on Xbox, the overworld, the big open world seems to have improved by about 8% in terms of performance. Not I don't think well, I don't know. We have actually had some reports on Twitter of people saying that they're feeling the difference, but we get that with content that hasn't changed whatsoever.
I can definitely
quite a lot of placebo.
I think I'm the only one here that's actually playing through this game right now. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I'm much further in the game, where the Xbox performance got much worse than what we've tested. And I did test this patch, and it definitely did seem to slightly boost the lows. Because you could tell, because there's a point, basically, when it drops under 40 frames per second, you get what looks like low frame rate compensation, which meant that if you were at 60 hertz output, that didn't work, and it would get quite juddery. And there's a bit less of that going on. But I will say, it's not, like you said, it's not a night and day difference, but it does help reduce those serious dips that you get in some of those later areas to make it a little more pleasant. But it's still the same situation where you really need VRR to help smooth it out, because otherwise it's the same juddery mess that it's been since launch.
I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, when you move out of your VRR window, things get a bit gnarly. So any kind of increase to performance, I mean, even if it is like 7% or whatever, actually, in some areas, if you look at the actual in the moment comparisons, you're looking at an extra 5 frames per second, which is significant. But, in VRR, anything that keeps you comfortably within the VRR window is a good thing.
A lot of the TVs, like the CX now, can go down to 20 hertz, I think.
Right.
But I feel like if you go under 45, you really start to notice it hard.
Oh, I think it's pretty obvious.
So it's better, but you definitely really feel it. So by this slight boost can at least keep you closer to 45 to 50 range, I'm finding, based on rough tests. So it does make it slightly more pleasant.
Yeah, so we ran a whole bunch of comparisons here. I mean, literally everyone I could think of. And if we look at PlayStation 5, weirdly enough, the introductory cutscene after you've been defeated by the first boss does actually run a bit faster on all systems, like 5%, including PlayStation 5. But in gameplay, in the open world, I didn't see any noticeable differences on PlayStation 5. But it's very much noticeable, well, certainly noticeable based on our performance graphing here, that it is improved on Xbox, which I find quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, console-wise, I suspect it's not going to be a game changer to most people, but it's certainly welcome on the Xbox side if you're in VR land. Also, I think Xbox Series S also gets a boost as well, and bearing in mind that performance is generally depressed still further on the junior Xbox, then this is again a welcome thing. So yeah, interesting stuff there. There was a big bunch of stuff added to the patch, John. Since you're playing the game, it looks like they've restored content that was previously hinted at in the network. I don't know. Do you know anything about this?
I haven't delved too deeply into that yet, but there's definitely some stuff they added there. And also, I mean, there's actually like full quest lines that weren't even available in the original review build that were added on day one. So it seems like it really did come in hot, and they've been just adding in features and stuff since launch, including like markers now for where the different NPCs are on the map, which is nice because, you know, I love the non-guided nature of this game, but knowing which NPC is where is something that becomes important the further you get, because you start to like, okay, who has this item, or where do I need to go? You know, it's good to be able to find that. You know what I mean? Rather than going to each point of grace or bonfire and then checking out like which NPC has what. You know, this makes it a little bit easier, I think, to remember that stuff. But I don't know, it's still an amazing game, but yeah, it's been a little bit of a rough launch for them.
I mean, there is still this big gulf in the quality of gameplay and the quality of the technology, and specific. Well, not so much the quality of the technology, but more the quality of its delivery, right? And you know, there's still issues like you can't go above 60 frames per second on PC without. I think there are mods now that are appearing.
Take you offline though, you know, that's like another thing. Like part of the gameplay experience is, you know, being invaded, doing jolly cooperation, and you know, seeing blood pools to know what's happened, and messages, and you don't get those if you start modding on PC. So that's why I'm always a little bit against people thinking that modding is the be all and end all of PC gaming, where if it actually actively takes you, if you can't access the complete game due to modding, then it's not actually a solution, in my opinion. It's just like a side option in that case. And I really do hope From keeps working on this. It seems like they are going to be, because I think this game is so stupidly successful that the publisher needs to have a good review at the end. They need to have those highly positive reviews on Steam and things like that. So I think that's going to happen. I'm just not curious what they're going to do console side, because this is cool that you're getting better performance there on Xbox Series consoles. But like the obvious optimization here is to reduce the resolution ceiling, or floor, I should say, floor.
Yeah, an aggressive DRS mode, basically.
Yeah. And it's not there, even though it's like so patently obvious. I don't know why.
I'd at least, I mean, why not implement their checkerboard rendering technique that's being used on the Pro, which looks fine enough, I think, and I'd certainly go for that with more stable performance.
You know, there were stories this week of I think they've sold 12 million copies of this already, which is absolutely phenomenal. And, you know, the success is well-deserved because the game is brilliant. But at the same time, what does this mean for the fortunes of the game technically going forward? Does it mean, first of all, well, okay, we've got to address the criticisms that are being leveled at the game? Or does it mean, hey, we've sold 12 million copies of this and we didn't really need to deliver the full technical package, and it still did 12 million copies? That's the question, right? That's kind of my concern here. And I don't know, you know, there's things here which just seem like simple fixes, right? That should be in there. Isn't it the case that ultra-wide works, but they add in borders on top?
That's what people say, yeah. I mean, I couldn't reproduce that behavior from my video. Like, I tried to do it. Like, people are saying if you, like, load in bonfires, or, sorry, Sites of Grace, or whatever it's called, that you can see the bars pop up at times. But I couldn't get that to happen. But people have showed evidence of it. So I think that is actually what is happening, which is so bizarre. I don't know why anyone would do that, because you'd have to actively program that to happen. I have no idea.
And then there is the fact, I believe, I mean, you can confirm this, Alex, that obviously we want a PC game to scale beyond 60 FPS, but has any official From Software PC release ever gone above 60?
No.
I don't think so. All I have to say is you don't have the right. Oh, you don't have the right.
You don't have the right. Oh, you don't have the right.
Yeah. So, you know, these are legitimate concerns, right? Where we've got a developer that's got sustained success over the years, key features that you'd want from a PC game. And again, the other thing which the elephant in the room on the base consoles has always been the inconsistent frame pacing. And on GitHub, this is something we've got to look into, because on GitHub, the PlayStation 4 has been exploited, games have been hacked. There's like a fix for bad frame pacing in From Software games, which is to the point where if this is actually true, if hackers are going in and are able to fix this issue, this is severely problematic. I've got to take a look at that. I mean, I don't have an exploited PS4, but I'm sure we can dig one out of storage. But this is kind of wacky, right?
It points at some communication issues, I think, with the audience's desires beyond the gameplay ones, because I think there's always been a background thread of people loving From Software games, myself included, just also saying, we loved your game, but they kind of just never hear the but, like the part after the comma with the but. I don't know. It's pretty weird, and I always thought that the publisher would somehow force the hand of From Software here, but it doesn't really happen in the past.
Interesting stuff. Well, I think we're going to leave Elden Ring there for a while, hopefully a long while, because it is becoming a bit of an Elden Ring channel at the moment for Digital Foundry, and we've got other things to focus on. And specifically, this next new topic. Yeah, this one, I guess there were hints of it. There were leaks on Twitter. There was actually a teaser for a GDC talk from AMD, but Fidelity FX Super Resolution 2.0 has now been announced. Deathloop has been shown using a new upscaling technology, which is, I don't know, can you call it FSR 2.0? It seems to be a completely different algorithm. But yeah, it certainly looks extremely promising. Alex, first impressions. I mean, you've seen some comparison shots. We've seen a YouTube video. I'm not sure how effective that is because
we'll talk about that.
YouTube.
Yeah.
It's YouTube. But yeah, tell us more. What are your thoughts? I mean, because here's the thing, right? We as an entity, and you specifically, have got heat for basically saying, hey, FSR 1.0, interesting, but it's not good enough.
Yeah. So this, I said it on Twitter, I'll say it here again, that this answers what I wanted from AMD the entire time. Before FSR was detailed in any way, they had just an idea of what it was, leaks about it, and then it came out that it was just a spatial upscaling solution. And I just rolled my eyes and was like, this is not at all what I want. Because we've seen that before in the past, we know its limitations. And then there was all the kerfuffle, hullabaloo, whatever about when it came out, about our coverage on it, and just me having a very hard stance line of this is not good enough for what we could have. And I always pointed in this coverage to the fact that there's other agnostic solutions, TAAU, temporal anti-aliasing upsampling, which has been in existence, I think, since about 2015 or so. It's just around the time like For Honor and The Division came out. So maybe that's like 2016. I can't remember the exact year. Yeah, right. Similar concept. Using temporal data over time to increase the apparent resolution. And this is tried, tested, and it keeps getting improved upon all the time. It's what DLSS 2.0 builds upon. And they didn't come out with that, so I was a little disappointed. But FSR 2.0, you look at all the documentation and everything they've put out so far, it is essentially, based on what they've said, a version of temporal anti-aliasing upsampling. It's reconstruction technology. It is, as John said, or I think it was you, Rich, does it actually deserve the name FSR at all? Because it is a completely different technology. And even in their little press guide there, they call it built from the ground up. So it's apparently not using FSR. So it is very different. And I think this is just exactly what we need. I don't know the specifics of how it looks in motion, unfortunately, because YouTube is pretty bad at doing that. And I think the style of video or the style of comparisons that AMD does, they did it for FSR 1.0 where they split the screen into half or into thirds with one side on the other side and the other side. And it's like the full image, but you're not actually seeing like for like, you're seeing just the other half of an image. It doesn't actually communicate the difference to you. So I think they could have done that better, but we're going to have our hands on this hopefully soon enough based upon what we've seen already here in Deathloop, which praise to those Arcane guys that they put in FSR 1.0 DLSS and now FSR 2.0, and who even knows, they may even do XeSS at the end because they're cool like that. But praise be to them, they're really good, and their DLSS implementation was good, and I hope that they find the time and effort to make the FSR 2.0 implementation just as robust.
It's interesting you say time and effort, because I would imagine, though, that now that they're leaning on motion vectors, that it actually does require more effort to implement for the developers. Probably not like too much, but, you know, it's not like just a toggle switch that you can turn on for all these games, right? It's something that it's going to need to be implemented by the developers, like DLSS basically. But the difference here is that it should theoretically work on anything of a certain, you know, capability.
They said in their press release, and Computer Base also confirmed this by asking that it does not require any special GPU instructions, which implies, I think, that it is not using any machine learning at all. I think it's just like a really nicely written algorithm. Essentially, it's not actually doing anything that like Intel's doing or NVIDIA's doing. I don't know what that means for quality. We'll have to see when it comes out.
I mean, theoretically, it's competing with like Unreal's TAAU and all that, right? Like, this is what they're trying to do. And have they confirmed whether this is something that could be available on consoles as well?
I think if it's just GPU,
it's GPU open, so
yeah, so
it should be.
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, but this is the big question, right? Is how is it going to compare to some of the console TAA upscalers? Which, you know, if we look at like what Insomniac are doing, there's some. I mean, it is really good. Interesting claim actually from AMD that it can. It should be able to get looks similar to, I think is the exact words, native resolution, and in some cases look better. And on the face of it, that's a tall claim. But what it kind of is reliant on is how bad the native TAA implementation is in any given content. And the thing which is quite interesting, I think, about Deathloop in particular is that, I mean, DLSS doesn't just look better than native on Deathloop. It looks a lot better, which kind of suggests to me that maybe the native TAA solution's a bit lacking. I think from my perspective, there's something which I find quite interesting about all of this, which is the concept of branding, right? And its impact on getting integration into games. So, you know, if we look at FSR 1.0, I'm sure there's a lot of developers who looked at it and thought, well, hold on a minute, I'm already doing a resolution scaler in my game. I'm already doing TAA upscaler in my game. Why should I put this in? And, you know, a good example, I guess, of this would be maybe Call of Duty Vanguard, where they had their own, you know, they've got their own TAA upscaler, which has historically been pretty good. But, you know, it got FSR 1.0 support as well, simply because I think AMD GPU users kind of expected it and possibly even demanded it. So it kind of led to an integration. And if this means that the similar pressure is to get in an FSR 2.0 implementation as well, just to get more games supporting a decent upscaling solution, I think is a pretty good thing. And that's partly down to the power of branding, potentially, you know, as much as the quality of the technology. But if the quality is there this time, then I think that's going to be tremendous. But yes, I think you're right in that it's going to, well, they've said it's going to require per game integration. And it is going to be using very similar inputs to DLSS, I'd imagine, which is to say that, you know, if a game has DLSS, it kind of should have this as well. And I do think that's a good thing because there are a lot of non-RTX GPUs out there. But it is all going to come down to the quality of the implementation. And there's a GDC talk coming soon where hopefully they'll go into a lot more depth about it. Because, I mean, there was a press briefing on this And they just refused to answer any questions, any meaningful questions about it. And perhaps rightfully so, bearing in mind they'd be potentially spoiling their own GDC presentation if they did so.
Yeah. Just one thing to talk about that I want to mention is that you mentioned, is this like, how does this look next to other industry use cases, like next to what Insomniac's doing? And I think that's academically interesting, but for the PC platform, it doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't matter. It just means we finally need games, no matter what, to have good reconstruction technology in them. And yes, that is vendor agnostic. I've always said DLSS should just go open and just see if it runs poor on a GPU, then that's the way it is, but it should at least be open. So I really applaud AMD for doing that. That's what I really want here. And that's what I hope Intel's also after as well here.
There was an interesting tweet from Ryan Smith of Anantech. I was a bit surprised that AMD isn't going to be using a neural net at all as part of FSR 2.0. And then he says, though, after chatting with a few people, a good point was made. A well-trained neural network is so valuable that it would be hard to justify giving away as open source.
Yeah. It's Intel is also kind of going that route too. Like, they're not completely open source with the first implementations of XeSS, but it's going to open source over time, apparently, right? So,
but yeah, obviously we're going to be looking at that in a lot more depth, and it will be interesting to see how it stacks up against DLSS, because I mean that's kind of the elephant in the room from that Deathloop video, which is that there were no DLSS comparisons, but historically, AMD just hasn't done it for any of its upscaling comparison assets that it's put out. But I guess, proof of the pudding and whatnot, we shall see what we shall see. We're talking quickly about AMD launching a raft of new CPUs. Essentially, if we look back at Ryzen 5000, I mean, that was a phenomenal CPU launch. Both Alex and I are on 5950X. Very happy with that. But there was a kind of issue with the fact that more affordable CPUs were not available. Kind of bottomed out at the 5600X, which wasn't a cheap CPU. We've got some movement here now, and we've got a 5500, we've got a 4500, which looks kind of interesting. 6 cores, 12 threads, $129. And that's really good. I mean, it's really good to see that we're actually now getting Ryzen 5000 permeating down into the sort of cheaper echelons. Because if we look back, Ryzen 3000, the 3600, was a massive, massive success. And it was never really followed up until now. And accompanying that is essentially the notion that older Ryzen chipset boards, like the 300 series, I mean, I believe those were available with Ryzen 1000. They're going to be getting Ryzen 5000 support. So I'll go to you on this, Alex, because this is quite interesting in that obviously a fire was put under Intel with the release of Ryzen, but Alder Lake has come along. It's really good. It's got some fantastic lower-end CPU offerings. We're always putting some reviews together on those. But this has actually caused quite a seismic shift from AMD to compete with that.
It kind of felt like with Ryzen 5000 that they had trounced Intel on a majority of the PC benchmarking points that were relevant to people, price performance points specifically. And then with Ryzen 5000, they knew they had this advantage, so the prices could inflate at that moment in time. And now with Alder Lake out, like you're saying, I think the fire's been put under their feet. And I think also the fire from reviewers as well, too, about the promise of having upgradability throughout the Ryzen series or the Zen series of processors, which is why these older boards are now going to be getting support for these Ryzen 5000 things. I think this is all great news, because I also did lament the fact that I got a number of messages shortly after Ryzen 5000 came out from people in the with like Ryzen 3600s and things like that, asking if they should upgrade or if it would be better to get a 5600X or a 3800 XT or something like that. Like these questions of like more cores older, less cores newer. And it was a hard question to answer at that point in time. I did actually ended up recommending most people get the most recent Ryzen because I just thought that single-threaded performance increase was so nice. But this makes it easier, the decision easier for a lot of people. The only thing that I'm slightly lamenting at this point in time is that if you're going to be upgrading an older chipset, you're going to be like PCIe 3.0. You're going to have like limited lanes and things like that. I always feel like dropping in a new CPU into an older chipset has limitations for longevity that might annoy you in about 2 years afterwards. Like you'd be like, oh man, I wish I just bought a different board.
But you can get a new board at that point.
Yes, at that point, hopefully get a new board.
At that point, you might be looking at a new platform as well.
Right, so it's like this piecemeal upgrading system is always something I've been annoyed with on PC in general.
I think the thing that surprises me about the 300 chipsets getting availability with Ryzen 5000 is that it's always been mooted as not possible before. But it is possible when Intel comes along with a really strong budget lineup.
That's pretty funny.
Well, and Rich, it could be said that Intel wouldn't have come up with a really strong budget lineup if not for AMD's competition. So
absolutely,
we'd still be in 4-core era. We'd all have 4-core processors with HT.
But this is the thing, right? This is the whole concept of competition, but also the sort of marketing lines that we've been fed over the years. You sort of seem to sort of morph into something quite different when the needs arise. But yeah, overall, I mean, basically the more availability of faster CPUs at the lower end, specifically Ryzen 5000. I mean, if you look at the 3600, which we still use in our budget or our mainstream rig, and we should use it because so many of them were sold. The fact is that, Ryzen 1000, 2000, 3000, they had issues in gaming, and which were comprehensively addressed with 5000. So the idea that you can actually get that newer technology now in the mainstream pricing brackets comfortably is really good. And I think there's some interesting moves here. I mean, there's also at the more expensive end a Ryzen 7 5700X, which is 8 cores, 16 threads, 299. Now, on the face of it, the Intel i7 is not that much more expensive and delivers better performance, but you'd have to upgrade your entire system essentially, or at least your board, in order to access that. So I'm quite sort of taken with this idea that you can keep your existing board if you're on a 3600 or whatever, and get a really, really big leap in gaming performance. So yeah, happy days, I think. Any final points to add to that? No, I didn't think so, because we've got a big hot topic coming.
Uh-oh.
And I can see John's winding himself up, ready for this one.
My nemesis.
So let's get on with it. Okay, so let's talk Gran Turismo 7. It's not a particularly grand situation, this. Yeah. As we record this, the Gran Turismo 7 servers are down for extended maintenance. And what is predominantly a single-player game is currently unplayable. So in your content, John, you lamented the always online nature of Gran Turismo 7. And you were projecting a time in the far future where this game simply wouldn't be accessible. And, a couple of weeks on from launch, it's temporarily inaccessible now, which is kind of not acceptable, right?
This is an interesting moment because seeing the reactions, I hope that people actually stop and think about what it means. Like, I complain about online DRM in games a lot, and I think it's a big problem. There's a lot of games out there already with this. We talked about Diablo 2 recently. There's a ton of stuff on PC, like tons of Activision games that you can't play offline at all. Things like this, you can't, it's a real issue for long-term accessibility and the ability to even play the games at all, right? So in the case of GT7 and GT Sport before it, for whatever reason, I think they say it's something to do with trying to prevent cheating, which, I'd say keep the multiplayer separate then, please. But it's a case where if you're not connected to their server, the game is basically unplayable. And now people are seeing what it means when that happens. And it really is exactly what I've been saying. It's not accessible. I don't believe for a second that all of these servers will always be online. And I know people argue that it's not important because, you're playing other stuff in the future. Who cares about that? But, I've just spent the week playing tons and tons of old racing games from the late 90s and early 2000s. And every single one of them is completely playable and still good, actually, a lot of them. That may not be possible with GT7 or GT Sport and other games with online DRM. Whether it's the publisher taking it offline, world events happening that decides that, okay, well, now this region can no longer access these servers or ever play the game. Things like that, like you can lose access. Or the PlayStation Network hack back, when was that? That was
2011?
Was it 11?
Rich, maybe.
I don't remember for sure,
okay.
But there was a big downtime at that point, wasn't there?
Yeah, and I understand for fully online games why you would need this, right? You're not going to play an MMO offline necessarily, although like in Final Fantasy XIV's case, I kind of wish you could. But I get that. But it's just a shame to see games like this, like Diablo 2 on console. I mean, this even goes back to stuff like, you remember Assassin's Creed 2 on the PC when it launched? It had this problem where if you disconnected from the internet, it booted you out of the game. People say, oh, PC gamers are just used to that, but nobody wants that, especially when these things eventually go down. At least on the PC, you can usually crack the games to get around it, but it's a lot more difficult on the consoles to do it. So I don't know. I think it's important to highlight this stuff when it happens so people understand the consequences of this stuff going down, because even if their argument is always like, well, I have internet, but it doesn't matter if the server is not online, right? And I think this game is good enough that it's absolutely worth preserving, and it's something you'll still potentially want to play in 20 odd years. I just played a ton of Gran Turismo 3. It's still good, really good, in fact. And it would have been a shame if that game was now relegated to some pile of obscurity due to the inability to play it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about the cost of games. This is a really expensive game to buy. The concepts that you buy it and you get home and you can't play it because on your own, because the servers are down. It's not really acceptable, right? I mean, as you say, if it was a game like, I don't know, built around multiplayer, MMOs, possibly Destiny 2, that kind of thing.
You know what, Rich? Even in Destiny's case, I'll be honest, it is a multiplayer game, but you don't have to play it that way. And I actually think it plays really well in single player. And I'm not happy that essentially you can't access it without their servers. They've been actually taking content away. You purchase content, it can be gone forever. You cannot access it anymore. Like, that stuff sucks. Like, it's not good. And the game is good enough that you could actually enjoy this offline. Absolutely. Maybe not every aspect of it, but a lot of it you absolutely could.
Gran Turismo 7 has also been complaints about the grind being significantly ramped up for this one.
No, well, that's not true until necessarily now. I have to check. But before the patch, there wasn't actually that much of a grind. It was actually less grindy than GT3. You got a lot more stuff in a less amount of time. And in fact, some people were complaining it was too easy to basically get a platinum and like get through all the stuff. But it's not good that the microtransaction stuff is a whole different thing. I hate that stuff. I would never use it. It didn't initially impact that, but it sounds like this patch, and I haven't tested because the servers have been down, they have potentially made it worse, so that now it takes longer, and I think that's a bad idea. So I really don't know what they're doing over there right now. It's madness. Stop it.
Okay, that's enough Gran Turismo 7. And indeed, Gran Turismo 7. Let's move on to the next topic. Quick discussion on this one. It looks like DirectStorage is actually moving closer to being a real thing on PC. This is essentially the software stack that will allow the PC platform to more efficiently tap into the strengths of the SSD. Alex, do you want to talk about this one quickly?
Sure. It's going to be quick, though, because there's not much to talk about. It seems like it's a big thing. DirectStorage is released. Oh, my goodness. But it's actually like, I would say one half of what DirectStorage is. So the part that released right now is the ability in Windows 10 and Windows 11 to use DirectStorage API to have access to a different method of loading that is more suited towards SSDs. So you can have parallel loading instead of just serial loading. There's none of like the Windows crap getting in the way. Stuff that was designed primarily, 25, 30 years ago around platter drives. So that is what that is. But it does not have the bit in it right now, the GPU decompression bit, or even I think necessarily the way stuff is moved between VRAM, system RAM, and the hard drive or the SSD in this place. I don't think that's actually necessarily in place right here. So it is right now the bit that developers can start and use to start programming their games with. But it doesn't really, I don't think this will actually have a big impact in its current form at all on the performance of games, because developers have been kind of doing this stuff, this like loading stack differences. Like I talked about Star Citizen ages ago about how it loads differently. They're kind of avoiding these issues by doing a different style of loading through the old Windows API for loading. So like, I don't think this is going to have a big impact. It's really when they unleash the RTX IO and whatever AMD is going to call their thing and whatever Intel is going to call their thing that allows for on the GPU decompression of stuff from the SSD into VRAM. That's when we're going to start seeing the major differences in game development in total that we see on consoles already with things like Ratchet and Clank. So it's interesting, but it's pretty academic right now. I don't think it's that cool.
And we're going to round off the news section of this with an interesting post I saw on gamesindustry.biz, which was essentially giving us a breakdown of the ratios between physical and digital purchases in the UK. Actually got some really good data there to look at. And this one, I kind of put it in as a sort of speculative topic because, I didn't know whether we should do it or not. But there's actually some really interesting data in here which caught your eye, right, John?
Yeah, I mean, currently it does seem like things are pretty even in terms of digital and physical split, which I kind of take as good news as someone that prefers physical media still. And that a lot of buyers also seem to prefer that. And even in the case, where games, they prefer digital, it tends to be more focused on titles that are predominantly online focused. So it would make sense. But the point is that it looks like both sides of the business are actually quite healthy. So one has not necessarily replaced the other.
Looking at some figures here, FIFA has got basically a 61% digital share, which kind of makes sense. But that does still mean that, 39% of those are physical discs. Call of Duty, similar, 58% is digital. But then again, you look at something like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, and the recorded sales for digital there is just 18.4%.
Spider-Man's 30%.
Yeah.
Far Cry 6 even, it's only 44% digital.
Mm-hmm. So it is painting the picture that if a game has got a strong single-player focus, then typically it seems to sell more as a physical disc.
I'm a little baffled by Battlefield 2042 only being 58% digital, though, because,
yeah, that one's weird.
I mean, Rainbow Six Siege is 96% digital, which makes sense. But
well, this is the other thing, right? Old games, which tend to be heavily discounted online, do see a big proportion. So, GTA5, 77% of that is effectively digital.
But probably not in terms of overall sales, right? So
absolutely, yeah. It was just for 2021. So, yeah, it's a legacy title, effectively. There's no data for Switch, which sort of isn't particularly useful because we're seeing a lot of 0% digital there on that list when it isn't actually
I don't know
0%.
why you'd buy digital on a Nintendo system at this point,
Oh my gosh, yeah, they've proven that they'll just toss that
ownership
away in about
issues
5
there.
years.
Just get the disc, man, or the cart.
Yeah. Guardians of the Galaxy, 27.4% digital. So again, single player game, very strong physical presence there. So physical isn't going away, John. You can you can rest easy.
As long as we don't have more of this DRM nonsense, it's good. Most games don't have that though, so thankfully.
Thankfully.
Yeah, but it's just an interesting set of data there. Just generally follow Christopher Dring of gamesindustry.biz on Twitter, because there's a ton of really interesting data there that gives a lot of insight into what consoles are selling, what the split is between digital, physical, splits between last gen and cross gen, which we'll talk about shortly in the supporter Q&A. Plenty of fascinating data to go through there.
Rich, there's breaking news. Power Slave on Xbox got 120 hertz support. So if you're on Series X or you're on Series S, it's 120 frames per second now. No better time to play it. It was already 120 on the PC, but awesome update. Thank you, Night Dive. There you go. That's your public service announcement.
Because it was just back compat.
It is still back compat on all platforms. They've just done the backwards compatibility plus thing, Gen 9 aware. So it does take advantage of that, which means it's also, 120 on Series S. That's a nice thing. So there it is. Go check it out.
Let's move on to some content discussion. I'm quickly going to talk about, obviously I've been focusing on Steam Deck for a little while now, not as focused as I should have been, but ultimately I have to run this company as well. But yes, essentially, next project I'm going to be doing is a series of things that you shouldn't really be expecting the Steam Deck to be able to do. I got some footage here that I shared with supporters this week, which is Flight Simulator on Steam Deck, essentially running with the Series S quality presets installed here, and running at 30 frames per second, and unless there's fast camera movement or trees. But yes, I was kind of blown away by this. I did see some footage online of somebody playing it on low, and it seemed to look, okay. But again, we're going to, once we get a deck over to Alex, it's going to be all about optimized portable settings and what we can do with that. But I've just been, choosing quality settings where the developers have made trades for consoles and then basically reducing the resolution, and we're getting some fantastic results there. But there's so much more to test. There's things you can do on Windows, which I don't recommend for Steam Deck, but does open the door to more tests. Ray tracing is indeed supported on a handheld. You can play Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition on it. You can play Quake 2 RTX. So I'm going to be talking a lot more about that.
Oh, yeah. Quake 2 RTX on the deck.
On a handheld.
That's wild.
It's happening. It's true.
Yeah, I love that. It should be doable. If you think about it, it just needs the support, and it apparently has it. So it's cool.
Good stuff. And John, you're reaching the conclusion of your Gran Turismo project, which has kind of evolved over time into something sprawling and galactically large, right?
Exactly. So just an update for everyone. It's almost finished.
Gran Turismo project.
The overall, so it's going to roll out for patrons, I think, this weekend, and then, public sometime after that. For the public release, I'm probably going to split it up into 2 parts, like we did with the PlayStation video. Well, that was 3, but because it's probably going to be over 2 hours long, and it's very split between, there's the PlayStation 1 era, pre-2000, and then there's the PlayStation 2 era. And it ended up being that I'm looking at Gran Turismo 1 through 4, as well as everything happening around these games at the time in the realistic racing genre. So there's lots of comparisons and discussions and quick, little bits on upwards of 20 different racing games on here. There's so many games in here now across all these different platforms. And I'm just putting the final touches on the showdown between 4 of these games when they all introduced the Nürburgring for the first time. So we get to see how the Nürburgring stacks up across these titles. Plus, it's a fun piece. And I really hope it shows like what made those first 4 Gran Turismo games so interesting and special. And also looking at GT4 and how much stuff is in there, it made me understand better why GT5 was such a developmental mess. Because they set the bar just way too high, and then trying to do that again at that higher fidelity in that amount of time, like it's an impossible task that they set themselves up for. But yeah, what a cool thing. I hope people enjoy it. I want to take people on a journey from the beginning of sort of like sim racing all the way through, essentially the mid 2000 period. So about 2005, 2006 eras where we're going to stop. And right now I'm just working on the GT4 part, and then there's a couple more comparisons in there, and then we should be rounding it out. So look for that soon.
And I think what struck me is that by covering the PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2 era, what we're also seeing is arguably, I'm not sure there is much argument really, the biggest generational leap we likely ever saw between console generations.
And I have comparisons with PS1 to PS2, and you can really appreciate the leap. And even the leap from the Dreamcast era, like just GT3 was doing a lot of really insane things for its era. Stuff that, like the car reflections, for instance, the way they capture those reflections, and then they're actually doing like rough calculations on like a roughness cutoff to ensure that you don't just get this reflection wrapping around looking the same across all body panels. It actually varies based on the type of material used, even though back then you didn't use the term material to describe those things anyways, because it wasn't really. But it's just, artists and the tech guys looking at these games like, all right, how do I display this thing? Like even Gran Turismo 4 then adds like a Fresnel simulation to the mix, and none of this stuff is done in ways that have any connection to the way stuff works now. It's just this like super custom, like, let's just fudge the math, make this work to kind of simulate the effect we're going for kind of thing. And I find that so fascinating just to see what these guys are doing and what they were doing back then. It's a cool era for sure.
Coming to patrons very soon, and I guess we'll be rolling it out in due course to YouTube publicly in 2 parts. So look forward to that. Okay, so let's move on to supporter Q&A. This is where supporters of the DF supporter program send their questions to us every week. We choose a selection of the ones where we feel we could provide interesting and or amusing responses. And we're going to kick off with one from Joe Esposito. In the last Direct, the frustration with cross-gen game development was hard to miss. It's understandable why the DF team wants to see the new hardware operating at full power. But with the reality of console supply shortages, isn't cross-gen the more responsible course? There are many people who want the new consoles but can't reasonably get one. Is it better to leave this segment of the audience behind in pursuit of maximum performance? If you were a game developer, would you want more people enjoying your work in a lesser state, or would you prefer having fewer people playing a better version? John?
When we first started talking about the next generation, I don't think any of us had really considered the implications of the chip shortage on these machines. I certainly didn't think that by 2022 you still wouldn't be able to walk into a store and buy these machines, right? But that's what's happened. So selfishly, yes, I would obviously prefer them to be next-gen focused, but with the cost of investment these days and the fact that people just can't seem to get these machines still, a lot of people can't, I understand why it's become this way, and logically it probably does make sense. I guess it depends on what the game is trying to do, both visually and conceptually. Because I think there's still certain things that you might try to achieve on a machine, on a machine with a better CPU and much faster storage and memory. There's things that you could potentially do there that really wouldn't work well on last generation machines. Ratchet and Clank, for instance, I mean, it's still one of the only examples of a game that was, what it's doing wouldn't work on a base PS4. And I actually bookmarked a tweet of somebody that claimed that within the next year it's going to show up on PS4, and on that anniversary I'm going to be sure to remind them that it was never announced for PS4. So if you're watching this, you know who you are. I'm coming for you. But I don't think that kind of stuff is cool. But conceptually, not everybody's trying to do that kind of thing necessarily, and I guess the one benefit of things being cross-gen is that we also still see a lot of 60 FPS, where I do think once we see some big Unreal Engine 5 titles that are really using like Lumen and Nanite, that we're going to see less 60 FPS. I just don't think that the machines are capable enough to actually deliver something like that Matrix demo, for instance, at 60, let alone, even higher res at 30 FPS, right? So I think we'll eventually see some return to that, though maybe not as many games necessarily, but I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, again, we had some interesting data from gamesindustry.biz across all of Europe. Sales for Horizon Forbidden West, 59% were on PlayStation 5, and the rest on PlayStation 4. So that's still a sizable proportion of people playing that game on the older platforms. So yeah, I guess from a business perspective, and also from people having the ability to access Horizon Forbidden West, it kind of works out, right? I also think in terms of the sort of broader market, looking at multi-platform development, the ability not to get new hardware has been keenly felt on the PC side
as well. Yes, true.
Yeah. So I guess what we're looking at here is just more scalability.
True.
Just generally,
I think most things can be scaled, right? There's some concepts that probably could not be, but most things, visually at least, can be scaled.
I don't know. The thing is, when you go back to 2013 and you see like Killzone Shadowfall, that was, that was basically a PS4 game that just wouldn't have been possible on PS3 in anything like the same way, shape, or form. So to have fewer of those exclusive experiences it's not great, but it is what it is at the moment.
I think we really are seeing truly diminishing returns at this point. Like, all these new techniques are amazing and they definitely enhance it, but games still look good without these cutting edge features. And that's, you know what I mean? Like, you're not going from like, this is subpar to, wow, look at this. I don't think it's possible necessarily to see a jump like we were just talking about with like Gran Turismo 2 to 3. Like, that kind of leap is just not something we're going to see anymore.
Just 1 to 2.
Yeah, just because
actually, 1 to 2 is the same system.
Yeah, exactly.
PS1 to
exactly.
PS2, yeah.
It's just, I've had to temper expectations, and I understand realistically that it's not possible. And these days it's not even about the hardware anymore. Like, back then it was like they could just do more because hardware had been so limited. Now I think the games are more limited by development resources, budgets, manpower, time. That stuff is what's really the limitation in many cases. So new hardware helps ease things for them in some ways, but it's not, that's not the main limiting factor anymore.
Next question here from Varley. He's coming in strong here. If you didn't have to use them for coverage purposes, would any of you ever touch a PS4, Xbox One system ever again? Or would you toss them in the nearest skip where they belong? We wouldn't touch them, would we, John?
Well,
would you touch an Xbox One?
Yes. Oh, well, that's a naughty question, but
touch the Xbox.
No, so
not in an erotic way.
I've become a bit of a little bit of a historian on this stuff, in terms of I really enjoy like having access to all manner of hardware and technologies across the full range that has ever existed in the gaming space. So, it's not like, it's true. It's unlikely that I would actually sit down and spend a lot of time playing Xbox One, given that everything that runs on there runs on newer hardware, often better. But which is different from before. It didn't used to be that way, but I still think it's worth keeping around and looking at. I just think it's interesting sometimes to look back at this stuff. So even if I wasn't using it for coverage, I guess the reason I do this stuff anyway is because I always found that stuff fascinating, right? So I would probably still keep it around just to look at that stuff and have access to that part of history. And what I really like to do is try to take those consoles, when possible, back to their like original state. Like, I really want to get an Xbox One with like I have the Kinect, get that with the launch day firmware going, or which I don't even know if that's possible, sadly, or an Xbox 360 with the blades, stuff like that. Like I think there is some value, and it's interesting to look at these things as they were at a different period in time.
That's an interesting point, because the blades were firmware updated out of existence, and we can't actually get assets of the blade system working anymore because there's no access to the OS.
That's such a shame. Like on PC, I just installed Windows 98 and it's like, well, who cares? But you can't really get the blades back.
They even patched out compatibility for the Xbox 360 HD DVD drive. Right? It's gone in future firmware, so you can't watch, the Fast and Furious trilogy on HD DVD, right? Like, it sucks. You have to go Blu-ray, and it's just...
I can only think of wanting to access either of those systems for coverage purposes, and I have recently for the Steam Deck to compare it against PlayStation 4. But yeah, as you say, that the issue is that there's no exclusive experiences for those, or very few limited exclusive experiences for those consoles anymore, because our new consoles are backwards compatible and run the games better.
I will say this, though. If you're a user of PSVR, it actually makes sense to keep a PS4 Pro or regular PS4 around as like a dedicated, like, here's all your VR games on this box, and just use that. Because you don't really gain anything much on PS5 because all those games ran at high frame rates anyway for the VR headset. So they kind of look the same. So, it's just keep that around, and that's your VR box if you wanted to do that.
Let's move on to the next question. This one from Jonas Larsen Tagizade. How close are the two Horizons, Forbidden West / Forza, to Nanite UE5 in terms of geometric density / complexity? Are we still seeing a generational leap with Nanite, Alex?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, just in all of those games, I talked about in the Matrix video, but in all those games, if you were to walk up to a wired fence, it would just be a texture for the most part. But in Nanite, it's just like a full-on 3D model. They don't care. So, yeah, it's pretty different. Still really different.
I mean, it is potentially it's just a completely different rendering paradigm, really.
It is, and it is interesting to think about because those two Horizon games are very detailed and dense. That most stuff at mid to far range is smaller than a single pixel, right? So you probably wouldn't notice it. It's mainly anything close to the camera. If you look up close, you will notice a distinct difference.
Or also just the LOD switching.
Oh, which, actually, that's the big one. The LOD.
That's the one thing we were talking about.
Yeah,
more
that's
obvious,
the big one.
Right?
That's the big one.
Yeah. So.
But what about? I mean, both of these games have got like really heavy on foliage and jungles and stuff.
Nanite can't do that
not yet.
So.
Not yet.
Yeah.
So we're still. I mean, it's still early days. That's the thing.
But you can combine Nanite with that, I guess. But
Yeah.
Then
Nanite trunk, and then
But it's true. You don't
whatever.
really get the benefit of that much benefit from Nanite if you're doing a foliage heavy game, right? So
yeah,
just for the terrain mainly.
Next question. This one from Stefan von der Kroon. So, the Steam Deck has this very useful 30 FPS option built in. Do you think the console manufacturers could implement such half refresh rate feature into their own SDK? And what about DirectX and Vulkan? Could this solve the uneven frame pacing issues in many games? Just got to expand the window here. At least if they use it, I guess. Yeah. How to address this one? Well, the console manufacturers do have half refresh rate features in their SDKs. Whether the console developer uses it or not is another thing. But they do have them. DirectX and Vulkan. Alex, so here's the thing, right? I've just been playing Flight Simulator on Steam Deck using the game's 30 FPS cap. And it is a properly consistent 30 FPS, just like the Steam Deck system level feature. So this says to me that possibly there are DirectX and Vulkan calls for half refresh. Is that right?
There is. I talked about it with 4A Games back in the day. That's why I asked, like, oh, how do you have such a good consistent 30 FPS cap? He's like, oh, it's just an API call. So that was pretty simple. Yeah, that's what it is on the PC side. The one thing I'm curious though is I always feel like they should have made that available at least on the Xbox side, because on Xbox you have a kind of generic control over VSync in a way, with the ability to force VRR in games with tearing, right? So, which is essentially VSync just better. So I always feel like on Xbox they could have done this. I have no idea what it is like on the Sony side.
I mean, the SDK side, there is a system level call to do 30 FPS because, I mean, on GitHub, PS4 hacked, there is a hack for From Software games that apparently fixes the frame pacing issues, and it does it by calling the SCE library. Which, again, we really do have to check this out to see whether it's true. But it does suggest to me that there are console libraries available that do it for you. And some games seemingly don't use it or have issues that could possibly conflict with it. But yeah, I mean, it should be possible, right? It should be doable. And we do see examples of it in the PC space. So yeah. Okay, next question. This one from Alces. I've been picking up CRT TVs and monitors over the last couple of years, and I'm noticing that they all now seem to have a variety of flaws. I know you're all strong proponents of the benefits of CRTs, and I'm with you 100%. But how do you keep them going? It seems like the knowledge of repair of these things has largely faded. It's a real shame. So I'm going to go to Mr. CRT, John Lineman, for this one.
You're completely right about this, and that the knowledge is fading away. And there's specific people in the community that have kept up with this, but it is not easy. The thing I will note though is that, so one of the reasons why the professional monitors have become so popular is because they do require maintenance, of course, usually capacitor replacements and the like, but they all tend to have options for solving the many limitations that can happen with consumer CRTs, right? Like you can dial in the geometry and the convergence and all those things, because that is one of the downsides to this technology, is that there can be issues with those aspects. And most consumer TVs that you would have bought, for your home, they don't have anything to adjust that stuff. Or if, at best you could potentially get inside the chassis and find some potentiometers to tweak, but even then that's usually not an option. You can also use magnets around the tube to sort of slightly modify the beam as it hits the phosphor screen. I've done that before. But yeah, so it's absolutely true. So not all CRTs are created equal, just like not all flat panels are created equal. And yeah, you basically need to know people that can repair these things or repair them yourself. Although, of course, always take care when dealing with CRTs. I think everybody always said, when you mention repairing CRTs, be careful with the high voltage components, of course. And then, yeah, but there's that guy in Germany that we visited that we call the CRT wizard. Audie and I made a pilgrimage to visit him once. It was a 4-hour drive, and he lives in this super remote little village. We pull up to his house, and just like, it's the weirdest place I've ever been, but it was amazing. And it's just like this crazy place where he repairs CRTs, and he's been doing it for so long. That's like his thing. But he's old now, and there's not that many people like this left that are still going to be doing these types of things. So we basically either have to learn it ourselves or, succumb to time. But if you're using retro consoles specifically, rather than a consumer TV set, and you don't want to shell out for a professional monitor, you can actually get a PC monitor, usually for very cheap. Old PC CRTs, those tended to have much better image quality because they were tuned for desktop usage. And if you pair that with like an upscaling unit, like a line doubler or something, you can actually get images that look really good and close to just using a normal 15 kilohertz CRT. So it's a cheap way to go that typically has less issues, so might be worth looking into.
Final question, this one from Todd Weitzel. What went wrong with Microsoft's Windows Experience Index score as a replacement for system requirements? What would your ideal system requirements box look like? Alex, I think maybe a lot of the audience will need to know what Microsoft's Windows Experience Index score actually was before we answer this question?
I think this was introduced with Windows Vista, and it ranked your CPU, your memory, as well as your Aero desktop performance and 3D rendering performance. Yeah, the Aero desktop performance one is pretty funny when you think about it. It required like DirectX 9. I think that's what essentially required. Yeah, and it would give you a score out of, I think originally like 6 or 7, and then they kept, when they realized, oh my gosh, we can't have a component from 2006 already getting 6s, they increased the score to like some higher number, probably up to like a 10, maybe 11. And
well, like Spinal Tap.
Yeah, like Spinal Tap. It
goes all the way up to 11. It's because it's one better.
The idea was to give you a good sense of what your component's strengths were. But I don't think I ever saw it referenced in any game at all. People just kept still giving out the same... If you even look at now a boxed PC game, it'll have almost the exact same minimum requirements language that a boxed game in 1997 had. So it didn't change anything. Why? I have no idea. I think this is just Microsoft. They kind of half-ass a lot of PC stuff sometimes, like where they come up with a really great idea, but there's no enforcement. And this could have been a really nice change to the PC landscape, to have a really good sense of what your computer can do, and developers could query it and say what you could have for require for a game. But never came to be, and now it's dead. So thanks, Microsoft.
But what about your ideal system requirements box? Probably
pretty similar, but nowadays it would be so much more complex because you would need single-threaded performance, you would need memory performance, you'd need multi-threaded performance, and then probably some very specific 3D things to be tested. Like ray tracing would be one thing, like compute performance would be one thing, and then like RAM pressure would be probably another one, VRAM pressure, because we've seen in the past like something like the GTX 970 fall on its face after a certain amount of VRAM pressure, right? So yeah, I don't know. It would be much more intense than whatever the Windows Experience Index score was. It would be, but I would like that.
You know, the PC is kind of online a lot already, so I feel like Steam could have done something to like integrate its like hardware survey stuff. Although that, you know, basically it's like, okay, the developer for this game can put something into the store page so that you can say, all right, look at my hardware. What kind of experience am I going to get in this game? And it like spits out some kind of result, you know, something that makes sense. Like, oh, you can run at 30 FPS if you use this with these quality settings, or you can do this at this. There's got to be some way to parse the data, but that's effectively probably the best solution I could see, is just some way for the user to just click a button and get like a quick little summary of what kind of experience they're going to have with the game. Because I feel like presenting a bunch of boxes with numbers in it is just going to confuse people, and it's just going to fail again.
That's an interesting idea. What if Steam basically beamed back telemetry from all the people playing any given game and were able to give an idea of performance?
Oh, they could.
They could. I think
it
would be great.
Yeah, we already see that with Star Citizen. I've talked about it before, but they have an amazing telemetry website where you can see what your components will get in terms of frame rate, CPU limited and GPU limited. It's kind of amazing. So if they can do that with just one game that is beaming back data about frame rate per second and system requirements, then they could do it on Steam already, probably even better with the pool of users there. So
maybe it could be done at the system level by Microsoft, and Clippy could return.
Yes, tell you what you're going to get.
Just an animated Clippy sort of looking happy or looking sad.
Did Clippy ever return as an Xbox avatar? Because I feel like that should happen if it hasn't already.
I don't think so.
Come on,
that's the future. Clippy and Xbox avatars.
Now that Double Fine is owned by Microsoft, though, it would be great if they did, you know, a Psychonauts-like experience where one of the worlds was like going inside Microsoft Bob and like, you know, the mid-90s sort of Microsoft stuff, and you're like stuck in that experience.
I mean, you know, some sort of visual representation for Microsoft. You know, the Windows 95 launch where Bulmer and all the others are dancing on the stage. Maybe if your PC isn't up to it, they're not so animated.
Yeah, they're slow.
But on a serious note, honestly, PC system requirements is a joke at the moment.
If you're joking on the dancing, they could also have like the Steve Ballmer pit metrics, where it's like depending on how capable your PC is, the shirt is more visibly soaked with his sweat.
Yeah, soaked versus not.
When it's all the way soaked, you're gonna
how
have a good
taxing
experience.
your hardware is related to the sweat factor there.
Exactly.
Oh dear. Okay, look, we could go on forever on this, but I think there's some genuinely constructive ideas here. But yes, let's wrap it up for now. Please do like, subscribe, share if you enjoyed the content. Ring the bell for notionally instant notifications. No guarantees there. That is my disclaimer. And yes, DF supporter program. Get involved. Join our amazing community. Submit questions to the weekly direct. Get the weekly direct.
Yeah.
Get the weekly direct early, because that is your privilege. But that's all from us for now. Thanks for watching.
Ja, GTA 5.